Vulgate, the testimony to the developing world. So many years and centuries have forgotten the ancient ways, not of ignorance and desperation, but seeking the truth outside the empires and kingdoms. Wisdom is kept in the mountains and the coast. The mystery schools focus purely on the esoteric will of God, studying divinity, alchemy, and language remote, long forgotten by common tongues, whispering arcana to the colleagues and jargon-coded rhetoric to the commoners. Men and women have always lived outside the empires, the control, the deceit, murder, and slavery, creating opportunity or practicing a trade. Some folks didn't want a man who despised them telling them what to do, nor a group preaching their foreign hypocrisies with blades and wine. As the world formed, the lands of Urdu and Naka struggled. Urdu gave to constant wars and territorial disputes. Naka has become a victim of internal land grabs and shrewd banking. The people have become ruthless, believing only in the survival of the fittest. Land and resources get raced after leaving a trail of murder, abductions, extortion, and annexation to the control of the religion. And annexation to control the region. At the same time, Maya and Esha in the southern hemisphere relied upon barter and cultivation. They separated themselves from their northern neighbors, leaving the Nakans and Urdun to their dog-eat-dog and when-all-else-fails mentality. In Maya, things were tranquil and balanced under family values and robust local communities. Across Maya were dotted metropolises, but mostly acres of enclaves, sea commerce, and the kingdom of the ethereal mother Bat spreading across Maya into Esha. The Eshan believed in practices of the mind and spirit above all else. Esha was a stretch of plains with most of their cities on the farthest reaches of the regions of Gaia. Thousands of accessible villages spread across Esha, focused on reaching enlightenment. There were rumors the Garden of Eden still sat upon the borders of Ekru and Esha, invisible to those with corrupted minds and souls. Ancient Eshan monks would train their lives to be able to step into the garden, though no one had ever returned to tell of their success or failure. An Ekru life centered around life focused upon cultivating and nurturing the wildlife, living in balance with one another and the mother Gaia, and embracing a relationship with Rakil the father, Gaia the mother, and Ada the son. The Ekrun existed before the other regions, focused on developing their lands and choosing peace over war, then learning the languages of all the groups around them to communicate openly. Ekru had been the superpower of Gaia and secret through its existence. Their people traveled to various lands and regions to learn and educate. Many on their sojourn returned to strengthen Ekru, as had been done for their time on the planet, while others remained abroad, taking professions or starting families. In allegiance with Esha and Maya, great strides have been made between the three regions. The emissaries and professors returning from Naka and Urdu came seeking to teach and not to learn, bringing their cultures with loud mouths, heavy hands, and closed ears. A saying spread across the globe, saying an Urdu professor could teach nothing and listen less, a spin upon the Ekru proverb, listen to teach. When Naka and Urdun refugees came to Ekru, they were turned away. The Nakans believed they could do whatever they saw, including people. The Urdun who arrived believed they could take whatever they saw or kill whenever angered, leading to a two-fronted war, pushing both groups out of Ekru, echoing throughout history. The Ekru began refusing trade and entry into their territory, creating borders and blockades. The Mayans had long refused business and access to the northern neighbors in Naka. Esha worried less because it had no direct routes into its territory other than by sea from Maya or land bridges in Ekru. The Nakan embargo lasted for 5 generations. The natural boundaries around Ekru protected it from direct invasion. However, the generations of migrants from Nakan travel through Tartarus were unrelenting and desperate. The Nakans feared their survival on the outskirts of Ekru, raising 2 generations before their presence can no longer be ignored. Nakans created gaudy camps, rolling into towns and causing violence. In a matter of decades, it had left lands in Ekru scorched and unsalvageable, then moving further into the region. The Ekru had little in the form of army or military. Many of the village gatherings had been comfortable with peace treaties and barter negotiations amongst themselves. Living for family and peace answered the desperate, violent, and at times cannibalistic ways of the Nakuns with Ekru prisoners of war. The Ekru elite royal guard were forced to respond to the threat, leaving the Ekrun capital of the Middle Ages, Ilipina, prepared for Ekru's bloodiest war. They were bolstering the cities and villages next to meet the spread of the migrants across the entire region, from the world's end to Grand Bath and Ekru's southwest district. The Nakan migrants approached with war machines dreamed of by their ancestors. The Nakans quickly celebrated their victory before the battle, unprepared for the actual power Ekru held. The Guardians of Naka and Ekru met Nakan's army head-on in an allied attack against the approaching threat. The two Vikars warred against Naka's army for weeks without resting until an entire generation of Nakans was exterminated. The battlefield had nothing but boiling blood. The children of Rakil fought bravely before their cause of glory turned into unrelenting wrath. Both guardians had fallen into corruption and internal regret over their notions of war. They had lost brotherhood, nationhood, and spirituality, devolved into racism, hatred, and anger, leaving nearly an entire generation of Nakans dead. There were hopes of a peace treaty until a boisterous leader rose in Naka for his rash violence and bombastic charismata. Naka had fallen into disarray and chaos, needing a bold yet cunning leader. The first patriarch of the Gregor family stepped into power with a personal army and ideas of a banking empire. Ansel Gregor spent his life seeking the mythical power of the Fire Guardian, lost to time and war regret. He died in his relentless pursuit, failing to unify Naka in his decades before dying at the hands of the Guardian of Fire in a duel. Until recent memory, the region of Naka has been divided amongst its most influential families and landlords: the Gregor family, the Wolf family, the Gosivioni family, and the family from the southeast, the Mirishimas. Each family struggled for power, land, and influence over the direction of Naka. The power struggle continues today, expanding into a weakened Ekru and Urdu, purchasing land and enforcing policy upon foreign lands. Ekru couldn't endure the tacit generational war of attrition as the once great civilization was reduced to a lesser region known as Nadia. It pushed to its major central districts, with miles around the new region left abandoned over the decades. Naka rebuilt along its coastline under the lead of Mayor Wolf. The Wolf family reinvented the Nakan currency system to replace their lack of natural resources. The depleted Naka sings of great wealth and superior culture, forcing Urdu to support its massive appetite for lumber, steel, hunting, and oil into the modern day. Urdu stood defenseless as Naka crept through its lands as it did Ekru, with its current-based currencies of the theoretical value. Naka took the world stage as a central power, demanding global recognition and respect. The Maya and Esha maintained their culture well into the Mayan era. Naka's ability to print and recreate its wealth without mind for the future was all-consuming. The youth of Esha and Maya were swayed into Naka, seeking to study its secrets of fast wealth, returning with debts and regrets and owned by the four families controlling Naka. The world decay is no longer planning for the global community or the future. Originality competed head-on with reinvention, desperately seeking to escape the pain and past. Naka did not teach of its division, debts, wars, or their annexed territories. Naka moved forward in history without thinking about what the future would hold for other regions or the less fortunate of their people. They never wanted to face the great desperation of their ancient ancestors. They clustered to their shores, ignoring the mass of its dreaded land with blistering heat, dry soil, and little natural water. If one has nothing, what can one do? When Urdu had nothing, they farmed and reaped their fields. Eventually, the wild fought back in unthinkable ways. New forms of life appeared, thriving upon the modern lands. Small creatures became too fast to catch. The predators became too ferocious to tame. A selection of Urdu took to the Rakuta Mountains for protection, while others were forced to fend for themselves in the rabid wilderness and clutches of the banks. Urdu sat upon minerals, ore, and metals, invaluable to a man with little infrastructure and few corporations to work the land. The reliance upon their typical war mentality brought Urdu and Naka together. The Mayans have always had abundance, being the source of all Gaia's waterways and rivers. The water region has excellent farmland and better fishing. They've never faced dramatically bad times until the death of their leaders. Even in the modern era, the sedition process for Nakans and Maya was brutal. The purchase of the land was nearly impossible. Though Escians were able to travel freely, the Nadians had the same rights but were never informed, and their media and politics were controlled by corrupt leaders or knocking funding. In God's will, these nations will find their way.